Hello Proponomics people, and welcome to the 4 pillars of property investment video from this week. And this one is in the second pillar, the financial pillar, and it's about my money in the now. So remember, the 4 pillars is a strategic framework that I've come up with over the past 8 years or so, always tweaking it, use it in my own group of businesses, property businesses and other businesses, in order to work out how to work the strategy going forward. And we're on the second of the 4 pillars, the financial pillar. People always say it's all about the deals and the money, but for me, that was never enough. I always wanted to also look at how you deliver, because it's easy to say, but it's not necessarily easy to do. And then also the overall asset management piece, which is a critical piece that a lot of people don't take seriously enough. And that's why they end up selling their properties at a discount at the end of a long tenure of an asset that's been pretty good to them. So I was determined to make sure that never happened as well. So fairly simple concept, right? My money in the now, easy game this. You just got money, you've got 100k in the bank, you can buy a property worth up to say 400k because you can use a 75% mortgage and a 25% deposit. Great. How much does that 400k property net you? Now perhaps you're going to say to me, well, it might be an HMO, it might be a 6-bed HMO, and it's bringing in a nice amount of rent, and I'm actually netting £1,500 a month net profit from that fairly regularly every month. Great. Okay, so you've swapped 100k for £1,500 a month, and probably a bit of hassle, a bit of time and a bit of effort. And then where's your next 100k coming from? And that's the problem, right? So you've got to consider, unless you've got unlimited money, in which case I'm not sure why you're sitting watching one of my YouTube videos, but unless you've got unlimited money, you're always going to run out. So the natural progression in these circumstances, I think, is to progress to the old adage I was told when I first started out: you make your money on the way in, right? So try and buy properties at a discount. Try and buy properties you can add value to. Now, in the ideal world, you put those two concepts together. So you're getting a little bit from the discount, and then you're getting a little bit from the value add, and that adds up to a nice percentage in the end. We consulted for a guy once who'd gone ahead, and he had a nice business that was making plenty of money, and he'd gone ahead and used a bunch of property sources to build a portfolio for him. So to use a kind of armchair service. And what we calculated based on his refinances was he was in for about 108 pence for every 100 pence of value that he'd got in his portfolio. So 100 grand property on a revaluation had cost him 108 grand. Now, that doesn't sound like a great deal, of course. It puts him 8% behind the 8 ball from the start. But when you've paid the sourcer an X% fee, and you've paid 3% stamp duty, and you've paid frictional costs and all that, it's actually not that surprising. A very vanilla investor might well do that. And I did say to him, look, you've had this done for you. It hasn't taken a lot of time and effort to do that. The mortgage process has been a bit of a pain in the backside, but really, I don't think I'd be too unhappy with that if I was throwing off tons of cash in a trading business. I don't know what you would expect. My portfolio building on the other side has been my primary focus, and therefore there's had to be deep discounts and value adding in there, but that's what I've been spending my time and focus on doing. So that's been my reward, if you like, for doing that, not running another trading business that's throwing off so much cash I don't really need to care too much about it. So obviously, even he, at some point, is going to run out of money. And actually, when he was coming for the consulting, it was because he was looking at selling his business, and that big income stream was going to stop, and he needed to learn really how to do value adding in property rather than just parking money in property. And that's an important concept that I'd like to talk about here. There are, at the shorter end of the spectrum, the problem is almost always capital. Capital's going to run out. How quickly can you replace that capital? So how quick, maybe you've got to go back to work to do it. Maybe you're already still working. Maybe you've got a consulting or a contracting job or something like that, and you haven't necessarily got a full-time commitment, but you've got something that uses your human capital to bring income and money into your household and into your investment business, a percentage of that into your investment business, right? And that's the way that the vast majority of people are. Even lots of people who are full-time in property, you often find they still have effectively a second job doing something else that brings money in. Sometimes it's teaching, consulting, mentoring, all that sort of stuff. It might be they've got a networking business. It might be they've got a letting agency. It might be an offshoot business that works within the group that brings a bit of bread and butter money in, but it can be very useful to have those businesses. But as I say, at some point, everyone's going to run out, and therefore they're thinking about what do they do with their money in the now. If you are one of those people who, and it is that 100k number seems to have endured over at least a decade that I've been doing this. People have said, right, I've got this. I'm going to put it into this property. sometimes inevitably it is an HMO because they've been a bit seduced by the yield side of it. And then when I ask them the question, what are you going to do when that 100k stuck in there and you've got the 1,500 quid a month? They haven't really thought about that, and they go a bit blank faced with it. And of course, it's important to make sure that you know where the next deposit is coming from, or that you're buying cheaply enough such that you can recycle your deposits through. So it was this fairly simple line of thought that led me through to, in the first place, looking at and of course everybody likes a bargain anyway, don't they? But looking at the mathematics and the practicalities and the workability of running a buy, refurb, refinance model. Back in those days, I didn't even realise at the time, but it was called momentum trading or similar. And the older versions of it are things like 321. So in 321, you used to buy 3 houses, and either, depending on how good you were at getting discounts and adding value, you'd either sell 2 and keep 1, and you'd use the proceeds from the 2 that you'd flipped in order to make sure you still had money in the tank to go on. Or if you were really good at getting discounts and stuff, sell 1 and keep 2. So you're having to work that little bit harder, 50% harder for every one that you keep. If you go back to 2019, in our operation, we were successful in over 100 purchases in achieving, all costs in, a 28% discount. So we were able to go back to the market and refinance those properties individually and pull out all the money on average. Not every single one was a money out deal, but some of them were so good they made up for the ones that weren't money out deals. And that was how nice and sweet things were before. Little did we know the pandemic was coming along, and it made that momentum model an awful lot harder. And of course, blockers are always in the way of models like momentum anyway, because there are certain lenders, there are certain valuers who just don't like the fact you've bought it cheap. Lenders tend to get concerned there's been a real distress situation, aka you've ripped someone off. Whereas realistically, if you're getting a bit of discount from the purchase and a bit of discount from the value add, actually they can be well within tolerances. Most lenders start getting itchy at over a 20% discount, and therefore it's much harder if you do get a really genuine discount because you had to complete on a property in 3 days or even 24 hours, which is something that we've done before when we've had to. If you're completing in 24 hours, just think about the risks on this side, that there are a huge amount of risk in buying a building like that has to be mitigated somehow. And in 24 hours, the only way to mitigate it is the price. There isn't time for proper due diligence. There's not going to be any searches. There's not going to be anything like that. So it's just the 1 day price. And RICS valuers talk about 180-day values and 90-day values and vacant possession values. But of course, there's also 45-day values, which tends to be what an auction purchase looks like, although it's sometimes called the 6-week price or the 4-week price. Auction normally takes more than 4 weeks as a process from end to end, but there's a not much difference between the 4-week and the 6-week concept. But then, of course, what you very rarely see talked about is the 2-week price, the 1-week price, and the 3-day price and the 1-day price. They do exist, and you can imagine the sort of discounts things have to trade at and the circumstances that lead people to have to release funds as quickly as all of that. And 90% of the time, it's still the best outcome for the vendor ultimately, because they've got to move quickly on something. So you've either got to be refilling that money if you're just going to go in and buy on a mortgage in the first place. You've either got to be refilling that pot of capital from somewhere else, and there's nothing wrong with that. Slow and steady wins the race. Absolutely. It'll be difficult to be a professional property investor and scale a group, though, with that sort of mindset. So ultimately, that can be done. Time is your greatest friend in this game. It's the old Warren Buffett adage of, time in the market, not timing the market. 30 years does an awful lot to property prices. The last 30 did, and the next 30, I'm fairly convinced will be similar in terms of the difference that it makes. So there's that side of it. Or you've got to be able to cycle cash through, add value, maybe sell some units off in order to top up those funds, in order to keep that money in the now where it needs to be, right? And it might be, if you've got that 100k, a better model might be, maybe you buy a house for cash, which, including the stamp duty, including the refurb, including everything, that's going to suck up the whole 100k, but it's going to revalue at 130, right? Not necessarily that easy to find, but even 120, 115, even 110, you're still going to be able to pull out some money and not leave too much behind, and you're going to get a fairly healthy return on the capital you've left behind in the deal. And if you've bought a good asset in a good place where hopefully things are going to appreciate in terms of capital values and all the rest of it, you're on there, you're on the ladder, that's the first one, and you go again with the second one, and you've only got to top up a small amount, and then you go on, and it works like that. Thanks.